So when we see articles like this is what we should be really taking serious. Smart bombs, military defense, and national security. World War III could happen. 5 places America could go to war in 2026. So this was published December 17, 2025. This is by Brent M. Eastwood. So there's a lot of crazy ads on here. So we'll try to pan through all of it. There's also a video. I'm not going to show it. I guess it actually is a YouTube video and you can look at it when you get ready if you want to. But it says even after a series of ceasefires and diplomatic wins under President Donald Trump, the global map is still littered with flashpoints that could pull the U.S. into war in 2026. And where are we at right now? At the end of December of 2025. Just about. So Dr. Brent Eastwood walks through 5 of the most worrying scenarios. A Chinese move on Taiwan, renewed confrontation with Russia over Ukraine's security guarantees, potential U.S. strikes on Venezuela or Iran, and a sudden North Korean attack on the South. Each theater carries its own triggers, escalating risk, and treaty obligations, and together they show how fragile Washington's current calm really is. His argument is simple. Deterrence, alliances, and readiness will decide whether 2026 stays cold or it turns hot. 5 places where the U.S. could engage in a war. While some felt the geopolitical environment was approaching a World War III like danger zone under President Joe Biden, things have somewhat cooled off under President Donald Trump, thanks to the current commander-in-chief ability to make deals, which have led to a number of peace breakthroughs, agreements, and mitigate war and ceasefires. But war always seems to be the rearing its ugly head, and it could involve the U.S. in a shooting conflict in 2026. So here are the most likely places where war could spark up and force the Americans to order boots on the ground or military strikes that could create the same types of endless wars the Americans were goaded into during the global war on terror. China is number one threat. It's one of the number one threats. The most obvious place to look for future conflicts in East Asia. China is a belligerent, rising power that often says or does antagonistic things to frustrate the Americans. China's designs on Taiwan always have the potential to create an amphibious attack against the island. It is not clear how the U.S. would respond to Chinese invasion of Taiwan. The White House's new national security strategy supports the status quo vis-a-vis the China-Taiwan question. And it is not clear from the strategic document whether Trump would order an intervention, but it is plausible that war over Chinese attempts to take Taiwan is always possible. China could also order a blockade or quarantine to starve the Taiwanese, freezing the export of semiconductors from the island to customers around the world. Advanced chips that power the modern economies of many countries. The U.S. would have to quickly figure out how to respond. Russia could require an American military response. Another region that has been a hot spot for years in Russia, the nearly 4-year-long Ukraine war has seen hundreds of millions of dollars in U.S. donations to Ukraine to fight back against Vladimir Putin's orders. A ceasefire and peace plan between the warring sides is possible in the next few weeks, which I have seen on the news recently that they're discussing. But they could say it could go either two ways. There could be peace, or it could be an indefinite war between Ukraine and Russia. So, and millions can be killed. This was coming from the mouth of Donald Trump recently in CBS and ABC News. So still, it appears that in exchange for Russia and the Ukraine to stop fighting, the U.S. would have to guarantee future NATO-like security needs for Ukraine, and Russia would attack again. But this would mean that Americans would have to order some type of military strikes and boots on the ground in a demilitarized zone between Russia and the Ukraine if Putin orders another incursion into Ukraine. So war could always be a possibility against Russia in the future. The potential of the U.S. military action against Venezuela, and that's current. So the U.S. Neo-Monroe Doctrine in the Western Hemisphere may create a conflict. The U.S. Navy has the USS Gerald R. Ford Strike Group in the Caribbean to intimidate Venezuela, along with amphibious assault ships filled with Marines. The old U.S. Navy Roosevelt Roads Base in Puerto Rico is humming with U.S. activity. Air Force, naval jets, and been flying in the vicinity of Venezuela. Trump sees Venezuela as the narco-terrorist state with illegitimate government led by Nicolas Maduro, a communist and criminal who is working to poison the American people with illegal narcotics. The United States has destroyed numerous Venezuelan drug boats. So it is not clear if Trump wants to order a kinetic strike against Caracas, but he certainly has the military assets in place to do so. So while an amphibious landing is not likely from the Marine Corps, there could definitely be airstrikes against Venezuelan military targets that could trigger the war powers resolution and congressional fury at a potential open-ended conflict in the South American country. And so this is a U.S. Navy SSN submarine right here. So the next hotspot for an airstrike, Iran could be taught another lesson. This is a strike against the adversarial country, which is Iran. While the U.S. attacks in June against Iranian nuclear infrastructure was successful during Operation Midnight Hammer, there could be a follow-on strike if the U.S. intelligence determines that Iranians are still enriching uranium or conducting other activity to achieve a nuclear weapon. So Iranian super leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, I may not have pronounced his name correctly, sorry for that, has remained defiant and has no plans to work with the U.S. in any type of nuclear deal to trade his weapon of mass destruction technology for sanction relief. Iran is no pushover, so there could be a cyber warfare as well from the Tehran. A terrorist attack against the U.S. and Iranians could convince their allies like the Yemeni Houthis to resume attacks against civilian and military shipping in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. So if those actions come to bear, Trump could order another strike against Iran. So the North Koreans could invade the South, creating a U.S. response as well. So finally, the North Koreans could always attack South Korea, and the U.S. would be the treaty bound. Also, to fight the DPRK. This invasion could happen quickly, and the U.S. forces would need to respond rapidly to keep the North Koreans from taking Seoul. While this is the least likely scenario, do not put it past Kim Jong-un to take such a desperate action that could involve the U.S. in a war that would be immensely bloody. Hopefully, cooler heads would prevail on the Korean Peninsula, and Trump could meet with Kim next year after a planned April summit in China ex Xi Jinping. The U.S. House of Representatives have included a provision in the latest National Defense Authorization Act that prevents any reduction in U.S. troops in South Korea without congressional approval. So, this pictured here is North Korean military, and that is them. Kim could argue that Americans are still interested in invading the North, as he has claimed for years, and this region needs much more personal attention from Trump administration to cool its tempers. So as you can see, the world is a tinderbox. So it says what happens now. It will require numerous aircraft carriers, forward deployed soldiers, Marines, huge defense budget to deter enemies and prevent contingencies from sparking another U.S. war or some form of shooting conflict. And so this picture here is North Korean Special Operation Forces. So Trump's national security strategy claims that America will not violate any country's sovereignty, but the proviso may not prevent some attack that could spark a hot war. Let's hope Trump can navigate the threats and keep the peace in 2026. So this is going in about the author. This is his critique on what he believes could possibly be some of the countries that may invoke or get U.S. involved in a World War III, as they would say. This is just yet one of the articles. This is kind of listing out some scenarios that are kind of imminent, or potentially imminent, that is, for what could be in 2026. So maybe we should start looking at some of these things, because what has recently just happened, my previous video was talking about how they recently added more travel bans, and now countries are rallying together, foreign countries particularly, to cancel all visas of Americans. So that is definitely going to affect the American economy greatly, as if it hasn't already been affected with the travel bans that Trump administration has placed against those countries previous to these countries retaliating. So this could be the precursor to what could be in 2026.